welcome to the new year. I'm Millicent Wonka live in Lagos. We start off in the central Chinese city where the coronavirus was first identified over 3 years ago. But despite the fresh outbreak sweeping the country, tens of thousands of revelers celebrated the start of the new year in central Wuhan amid heavy security. Many Chinese took to the streets in Beijing to mark the beginning of 2023. Authorities and state media sought to reassure the public that the COVID-19 wave was under control and nearing its peak. But elsewhere, frontline medical staff in its hospitals were working round the clock to treat COVID-19 patients. State broadcaster reports that a hospital in the eastern city of Nanjing, patients flooded its intensive care unit, ICU, with 80% of its patients aged 65 years old and over, many of them with underlying health conditions. Medical staff in the hospital turned ICU patients onto their stomachs in bed in the day to increase their breathing capacity before turning them back onto their backs in the evening. We're told the staff spent up to 9 hours each day to complete the routine for approximately 26 patients daily, and this is on top of performing other duties. In Changsha City, capital of China's southern province of Hunan, another hospital expanded its respiratory critical care unit with 440 extra beds. Doctors with varying experience levels have been paired up to treat the patients and ensure the relatively inexperienced doctors can catch up quickly too. Meanwhile, medical personnel at the emergency room of a hospital in southwest China's Sichuan province are working hard. This is to cope with the peak of patients with fever these days. The West China hospital, located in the center of Chengdu, capital of Sichuan, is a critical care center for COVID-19 patients designated by the National Health Commission. Since late December, patients to the hospital's emergency department have continued to increase from around 300 a day to the 700 or 800 daily and more than 1,000 in peak days. Staying with the coronavirus pandemic, Morocco will impose a ban on people arriving from China, whatever their nationality, from the 3rd of January to avert any new wave of COVID-19 infections. This is according to the Foreign Ministry. Several countries have imposed restrictions on travelers from China due to a surge in COVID-19 cases. Thousands of tourists visit Morocco from China every year, usually traveling on flights that come via the Gulf. In an abrupt change of policy, China this month began dismantling the world's strictest COVID regime of lockdowns and also extensive testing, putting its battered economy on course for a complete reopening. But the lifting of restrictions has led to COVID spreading largely unchecked and likely infecting millions of people a day there, and that's according to some international health experts. We'll talk some more about that in a little within this bulletin, but let's take you to the world's largest trade deal, where the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership has made positive contributions towards the development of regional economy while boosting confidence of member countries against the backdrop of global headwinds. Mr. Li Yong, chief researcher at the DNC think tank, summarized the achievements and results of promoting economic growth since the implementation of the partnership. He highlighted the role of the body in boosting trade volume as well as economic growth.
Really has been the first year that the trade pact has been implemented, and the immediate result that we can see is the trade and investment cooperation, and definitely the deepened trade and investment cooperation will be translated into the economic growth. And in terms of trade, as you mentioned earlier, China has benefited from the trade pact, and other countries too. Exactly. I think, all the countries actually have done their own studies in terms of the pros and cons of being a part of RCEP, and Indonesia took about a year, to ratify the trade pact. And obviously, this is a strong commitment by Indonesia to the multilateralism in the region, but also a result of the cost and benefit analysis. I think definitely RCEP is going to contribute positively to the regional economic development, particularly against the backdrop of the global headwinds. And if we see the continuation of the implementation of RCEP, definitely in terms of trade and investment, that there will be more opportunities for all countries to benefit. And this is an important driver for the regional economic recovery, in particularly the post-pandemic economic recovery. Implementation of the trade pact is going to help all member countries improve their trade terms, their competitiveness, and also the predictability of the business environment, so that they can talk about relative certainty in terms of the future prospect of the trade, investment, and economic growth.
Away from that region, 4 people have died and 3 others in critical condition. This is when 2 helicopters collided mid-flight near popular tourist attraction on Australia's Gold Coast today. The mid-air collision occurred close to the SeaWorld resort when 1 helicopter was on the process of landing and the other taking off. Queensland Police Acting Inspector said 1 damaged helicopter managed to land safely on a sandbank in the Gold Coast Broadwater, but the other crash landed in the same area.
So at about 2 p.m. today, police and emergency services were called to a 2 helicopter mid-air collision just opposite SeaWorld in the Broadwater. Those 2 aircraft, when collided, have crashed, landed on the sandbank just out from SeaWorld Resort. As a result of that, 4 people have lost their lives today, and we have 3 others critical in hospital. At this stage, it's my understanding that they're with the 7 people that are injured are from just 1 helicopter, and all the others are still injured, but we're obviously further inquiries are being conducted.
Well, in 2020, we knew very little about the novel virus that was to become known as COVID-19. Now, we've entered 2023. A search of Google Scholar produces around 5 million results containing the term COVID-19. So how will the pandemic be felt this year? We're also seeing a number of countries reacting to, China's latest decisions and the fact that they are recording more cases. Well, to answer this question and more is the Director General of the Nigeria Center for Disease Control, NCDC, Dr. Ifedayo Adetifa. Happy New Year to you, and thank you for joining us on the program.
Happy New Year to you as well, and thanks for having me.
First, what's your take on what's going on in China with the virus, the coronavirus?
China is seeing a resurgence or increase in cases associated with severe illness, hospitalization, and deaths. This is associated with their transition from the zero COVID strategy that they previously had, which when combined with the fact that there appears to be insufficient coverage of the population with vaccines that are known to have the highest impact against severe disease, hospitalization, and death, means that as far as transmission is concerned, China, a significant proportion of its population, is at the stage where most of the world was about almost 2 years ago.
One wonders why. Okay. Well, one wonders why, because some people have questioned that perhaps, I mean, this is a country that has one of the largest vaccinated the largest number as well. Is it the type of vaccines that has led to this, or do you think perhaps the COVID zero policy was the problem?
Well, it's a mixture of things. China's given out mainly or mostly vaccines that were manufactured in China. Two types. The impact of those vaccines against what we'll consider clinically significant outcomes, such as severe illness, the need for hospitalization and death, appears to be less than is seen for all of the other vaccines that were more popularly used elsewhere and in Nigeria, for example. But in addition, the lockdown and significant restrictions that were previously implemented in that country also means that even natural infection has not been allowed to happen to the extent that it has been seen elsewhere. So there are also no benefits from whatever boosting or natural protection that would have been conferred by allowing by natural infection, as has been seen elsewhere. Back to you.
One would think that they are sort of experienced in handling coronaviruses, and that this, you know, could have been better handled. And this is also working towards, you know, that policy, which is the zero COVID policy. I mean, the WHO at the time said that they needed to review that policy. And I personally thought that, you know, they were doing well initially, but then we had the protests and then the economic impact as well. I'd like to get your thoughts on, you know, what some EU countries are doing now, several of them imposing restrictions. Do you think that these measures are justified?
I think that, you know, the Nigerians are rightfully concerned about what's going on in China. A lot of what's going on in China has been put in the spotlight because of travel advisories, mainly negative testing, or the requirement for negative PCR tests from travelers coming from China into countries in North America and in Europe, which I think is swayed concerns somewhat and is providing a bit of distraction even for the Nigerians that are concerned and people in other parts of the world. When we look at the data, we are seeing upticks in cases, in case numbers, in hospitalization, and in deaths. In many countries in the world, of course, some of this is associated with the winter exacerbations that we see for respiratory illness. But the data that is available shows increase in cases in the UK, increase in cases in the US, increase in cases obviously in China and elsewhere. So from our perspective, we are looking at risk across all countries where there's potentially traffic or travel, likely travel from Nigeria to and fro these destinations, and not just China alone. The other thing we know is that in addition to the recent transition from the zero COVID policy, there are concerns about that there might be new variants or Omicron babies that may also be contributing to the uptick in cases. Specifically for China, there is talk about a B.5.2.1 Omicron sublineage or baby, as well as something called the BF7. Our genomic surveillance shows that as far as July and August, we already had B.5.2.1 in the country and circulating, and that was not associated with any increase in cases. At the moment, we haven't seen any BF7, which is the other Omicron baby that is people think is responsible for or contributing to the uptick of cases in Kenya, in China. But we are waiting to, of course, update our genomic sequencing results with the December data. The other thing is for the US and the UK, there are they have the XBB 1.5 variant as well, and other XBB-related variants are thought to also be behind the uptick that they are seeing in cases. We have seen XBB variants in Nigeria already from previous months. We haven't specifically seen XBB 1.5 or yet. That may be in the December compilation of results when we get that. But I think the thing we need to highlight to citizens is that as far as we are concerned at the NCDC and the Ministry of Health, we are looking at all countries where there's potentially risk, and not just the spotlight that has been placed on China because of restrictions put in other places that also have uptick in cases that we are paying attention to and should also be a source of worry if anything changes or if they continue in the same trajectory that they currently have. However, and I will close by this, is that we need to, if we're taking on board lessons from the pandemic from more than 2 years of responding to it, we need to remember that these actions, whether it's requiring PCR tests, negative PCR tests, as we try to do for Omicron, they didn't really do much or do anything in terms of preventing circulation of Omicron when it first emerged. We are not dismissive of the possibility that we may have dangerous Omicron babies, but the facts that we currently have at hand do not suggest that we should expect any rise in cases or any rise in severe illness at the moment. But as I said, it's a rapidly moving situation. We will continue to evaluate, we'll continue to gather data, and we'll continue to review weekly. And it is possible that when we look at the data that has accumulated in the elapsed period, later in the week when we sit down to review the scenario, we might see evidence to inform decisions or actions that will be put in place to try and protect citizens. But at the moment, we haven't seen any reason for that to happen yet. But as I said, it's a rapidly evolving situation and we continue to watch.
Just before we let you go, is there a new direction for the NCDC, and this is taking into consideration diseases for 2023, and this is of course in line, you've mentioned how you're waiting and observing what's happening with COVID-19?
Well, I'm not sure what you mean by a new direction, but what we certainly know, or that we are sure Nigerians will happen, is that the headlines do not always reflect what the NCDC and other agencies are doing in terms of our health security. We continue to look after or look out for all of the pathogens that are of relevance in terms of their likelihood to cause threat to public health, regardless of whether they are making the news or not. So it's Lassa fever season. We are keeping an eye on that. We still have an ongoing monkeypox outbreak. We are still managing that. I wish there's a bit more attention being paid to the fact that we're still dealing with a significant number of cases of cholera across the country. We are still responding to that along with partners in the states. And we know that with increasing human action in the environments that we coexist with animals, we expect that the threat of other zoonotic illnesses will continue to persist through the year. And we continue to look out for any emerging or reimagined pathogen that may be a threat to public health. So our focus is survey. We will continue to work on strengthening our surveillance and to increase its sensitivity to be able to detect the next likely outbreak so that we can be better placed to respond appropriately. The second thing is to also take forward all of the lessons learned from COVID, all of the investments that have been put in place from COVID, and to make sure that we continue to merge that into a streamlined platform that will continue to serve our health security and the ability to respond to any threats that emerge in the country. Back to you.
We appreciate your time. NCDC DG, Dr. Ifedaya Adetifa, thank you for joining us on the program. Best wishes of the new year.
Thank you.
The war in Ukraine following Russia's invasion continues, but here's how Ukrainian soldiers on the frontline trenches marked the new year. It was with sadness and resolve, remembering the fallen and vowing to fight until they achieve victory. 49-year-old Ole Zarudsky volunteered for the Ukrainian Army's 68th Brigade in the eastern Donetsk region following his son's mobilization. He fought back tears as he described how his son is now fighting for his life after suffering a head injury. Bombardments and air raids marked the start of the new year as Russia continued intense attacks in Ukraine following a barrage of missiles fired on New Year's Day, New Year's Eve, that is. Pavlo Peridovsky, a musician in civilian life, marked the new year with the performance of a song he composed and dedicated to 12 members of his unit who were killed in a single night. And Kyiv Mayor Vitaly Klitschko briefly left the Ukrainian capital to visit soldiers in the Donetsk city of Bakhmut, the epicenter of fierce fighting in recent weeks. He praised them, quote, saying, "The boys who defend our Ukraine every single day," and concluded with chants of glory to Ukraine with rousing responses from soldiers that included death to the enemy. And despite heavy fighting around Bakhmut, the city has remained in Ukrainian hands for the duration of the 10-month war, though much of it lies in ruins. Meanwhile, President Zelensky said that his only wish for all Ukrainians for 2023 is victory and resolve to stay the course while the country fights. He reiterated, as he often has since Russia began its invasion in February, that he will stay with his people while they are fighting for freedom.
There are a few minutes left before the new year. I wish one thing to all of us now, the victory. And then this is the main thing. One wish for all Ukrainians. Let this year be the year of return. The return of our people. Warriors to their families. Captives to their homes. IDPs to their Ukraine. Return of our lands. And the temporarily occupied ones will become free forever. Return to normal life, to happy moments without curfew, to earthly joys without air raids. Return of what was stolen from us. The childhood of our children, the peaceful age of our parents. For our cities to be free, our friends to be trusted, and so that in the reports near the figures of 100,000 destroyed enemies, thousands of units of destroyed Russian equipment, the main figure and the main success, 603,628 square kilometers, would appear. The area of independent Ukraine, as it has been since 1991, as it will always be. Let the new year bring all this. We are ready to fight for it. That is why each of us is here. That is why I am here. We are here. You are here. Everyone is here. We are all Ukraine. Glory to Ukraine. Happy New Year.
On the other side, Russian President Vladimir Putin devoted his annual New Year's address to rallying the Russian people behind his troops fighting in Ukraine and pledging victory over Ukrainian neo-Nazis and a West supposedly intent on destroying Russia. In a stern recorded video message broadcast on national television, Mr. Putin cast the war, which he calls a special military operation, as a near existential fight for the future of Russia.
Мои граждане России, дорогие друзья, завершается 2000...
I wholeheartedly wish a happy new year to all those involved in a special military operation. Those who are here with me now, those who are on the front line and on the front lines, those who are training in training centers to fight later, those who are in hospitals, or who has already returned home after fulfilling their duty. Dear friends, the New Year has been celebrated in our country at all times, even in the worst times. It has always been and will remain a beloved holiday, and as a magical gift of bringing out the best in people, multiplying the importance of traditional family values, generosity and trust. The goal of New Year is to make our dear ones happy, to warm them with attention and warmth of heart, and to give them something they dreamt about. Now is the perfect time to put all personal grudges and misunderstandings behind us, to tell your dearest people about your tender feelings, about love, about how important it is to take care of each other, always, at all times. May these heartfelt words and noble feelings give us all the strength of mind, the confidence that together we will overcome all difficulties and keep a country great and independent, that we will go forward and win only for the sake of our families and for the sake of Russia, for the future of our only beloved motherland. Happy New Year, dear friends. Happy New Year 2023.
Well, today, Ukraine says that around 400 Russian soldiers have died in a missile attack on the occupied Donetsk region. Russian officials have contested the figure, admitting to only 63 of their troops being killed in the blast. Neither claim has been verified. The attack hit a building in the city of Makivka, where Russian forces were thought to be stationed. Meanwhile, Kyiv air raid sounded Sunday night as the latest wave of strikes from Russia continued. A statement today, Russia's defense ministry said Ukrainian forces fired 6 rockets using the US-made HIMARS rocket system at a building housing Russian troops. 2 of them were shot down, he added. Well, Daniil Beznozov, a senior Russian-backed official in the occupied part of Donetsk, earlier said the missile struck Makivka 2 minutes after midnight on New Year's Day. Although access to Russian-controlled areas is restricted, a number of Russian commentators and bloggers acknowledged the attack but suggested the numbers were lower than claimed. Meanwhile, Russia's defense ministry said that it had carried out its own strike, and this is using high-precision weapons on Ukraine's military industrial infrastructure. This was carried out on December 31st. Now, it said that it carried out 31 missile attacks, 12 airstrikes across the country in 24 hours. Ukraine's Air Force Command said it had destroyed 45 Iranian-made Shahed drones overnight, 32 of them on Sunday after midnight and 13 late on Saturday. Thousands of people have been paying their respects to former Pope Benedict XVI at his lying-in state at the Vatican. He died on New Year's Eve at the age of 95, almost a decade after he stood down because of ill health. Pope Francis will preside over Thursday's funeral. The first time a pope will be buried by his successor. As dawn broke over the Vatican, a queue had already formed at the edge of St. Peter's Square. His body will be displayed for 3 days in an open casket at St. Peter's Basilica, with people allowed to pay their respects until 7 p.m. each evening. For the Catholic Christians, the turn of the year is also a sign of mourning for the deceased former Pope Benedict XVI. Around the world, bishops and priests called for prayer in New Year's Eve and New Year's prayers and paid tribute to the deceased. In Germany, mourners can sign the official book of condolences in Berlin from today. The Catholic German Bishops' Conference announced that the book would be laid out in the Apostolic Nunciature, the diplomatic representation of the Holy See in Berlin. The chief German bishop was one of those who signed the former Pope's condolences book.
The mortal shell is only the part that stays here and hopes for resurrection. But the person, the bishop, the priest, the Pope Benedict XVI, Joseph Ratzinger, lives with God. And this is my hope, that he has found his eternal home in the goodness and mercy of God, whom he served his whole life.
Other mourners paying their respects today include Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni to former Pope Benedict XVI inside St. Peter's Basilica. The body of Benedict XVI will lie in state in the Basilica for 3 days before his funeral. Queues built up in St. Peter's Square on Monday as the faithful made their way into the famous basilica to pay their respects. Mourners from around the world joined members of clergy in the lines waiting to file past his body. The former Pope Benedict, 95, died on December 31st morning in the Vatican after his health suddenly deteriorated over Christmas. He was Pope between 2005 and 2013 when he became the first in 600 years to step down instead of ruling for life.
Pope Benedict was a good pope in every sense. His decision to step down was a wise one at the time. It was a choice made for God, and a strong change was needed in the church.
I was moved. It's a moment of renewal, I would say so, and a touching moment because it was a great pope. It was a marvelous pope. At least who was able to explain about the scriptural matters of faith and also the traditional teaching of the church. So that's what I would say. So at least I will remember him for that.
The Vatican said his body would lie in state from Monday in St. Peter's Basilica and that Pope Francis will preside at his funeral on Thursday morning, the 5th of January, in the same square where Benedict, who was then Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger, said the funeral mass for his predecessor, Pope John Paul II, in 2005. The ceremony will start at 9:30 a.m. On to other stories now. In the United States, eyewitness footage showed a heavily flooded parking lot of a grocery store chain in California's San Carlos on January the 1st. Flooding caused by heavy rainfall has inundated major roads and infrastructure across California. As of Sunday, some parts of nearby San Francisco had accumulated over 5 inches of rainfall, according to local media. Authorities have cited an atmospheric river, a phenomenon in which a narrow region in the atmosphere transports moisture over long distance, as the primary cause of the heavy rainfall. Our Washington, D.C. correspondent Maria Burr joins me now for more. Hi, Maria, and Happy New Year. Let's begin in California. Is this atmospheric river phenomenon causing the flooding? Is this something new?
Happy New Year. And yes, this atmospheric river that you see, it's definitely new. I mean, those of you who are familiar with the east and the west coast of the U.S., it is always said that California is sunny California. And so this type of torrential rain is definitely speaking to the climate change challenge the U.S. has been experiencing over the past few years.
Will it get worse, and what plans are in place?
So the plans that are in place right now are to try to create dams and things of that nature that will try to subside some of the rivers. Obviously, the first and most important aspect of this right now is to ensure the safety of individuals, try to evacuate those that are in areas that could be flooding. There are, even there's a prison at this time that's even being evacuated. So it's gotten to a place where even some of the government facilities are having to evacuate. Obviously, California is not prepared for this type of rain weather. They are prepared for earthquakes, but they are not prepared for this type of weather that they have seen here recently. So this is going to have to ensure that they rethink the way in which they are developing some of the communities. And as you have said before, you can just see streets that have pretty much turned into streams. And this is going to create quite a challenge for the rebuilding once the water does reduce and it does subside.
Maria, for other cities, before the new year, it was a case of blizzards and snow. What's the situation of things, especially Buffalo?
Yes, Buffalo, New York, as you know, was a city that was under very high alert in a system that at this time they have reopened many of the streets and the highways there, but they're still in search and rescue mode for some individuals who are trapped in homes. For those of you that saw images of ice being about 8 foot thick on homes right near the Erie Lake, which is one of the 7 Great Lakes. And so it is definitely, I think, going to be a long time of recovery, because even as the snow begins to melt, you're still going to be talking about a lot of flooding even in that community, just due to the level and the amount of snow that actually fell right before the Christmas holiday. And so that's going to create much challenge on the infrastructure as well, which could also impact some of the utilities as well, whether it's the heating systems, having the type of freezing temperatures and being able to sustain that, and also the water supply.
And there were quite a number of casualties getting into the new year. Has this stopped? Because it's still, I'm sure, a very painful period for families that lost loved ones amid the New Year festivities.
Until they say that there's no more search and rescue efforts being conducted, I think that we cannot say that there will be no more casualties. There's still homes that they have not been able to reach that could be in areas that were very hard to get to during the extreme weather conditions that we saw less than a week ago. And so I think that's going to be still potentially, hopefully not, other casualties if they are not able to complete the search and rescue here in the very near future.
Thank you, Maria. We look forward to more of your reporting this year. Thanks again. Thousands of exhausted passengers today remain stranded outside the aging Ninoy Aquino International Airport in Manila after a New Year power outage caused hundreds of flights cancellations. Long queues were seen forming at crowded airport terminals by passengers waiting to rebook their flights. Chiong, general manager of the Manila International Airport Authority, said the airport was early this morning, handling a maximum of 15 arrivals per hour compared to 20 during normal operations. The outage was the result of the unprecedented failure of both primary and secondary power supplies, he said, adding that it will take around 72 hours for airlines to normalize their operations. North Korea has sacked Park Jun-cheon, the second most powerful military official after leader Kim Jong-un. State media reports that Park, vice chairman of the Central Military Commission of the ruling Workers' Party and the secretary of the party's Central Committee, was replaced by Ri Yong-gil at the committee's key meeting last week. KRT footage showed Park sitting in the front row of the podium with his head down during the meeting, while other members raised their hands to vote on personnel issues. His seat was later unoccupied. Park's dismissal comes despite Kim mostly lauding the military's advances in weapons developments during the meeting, unlike other areas where he pointed out some faults and called for improvement. We head to South Africa now, where the country ushered in 2023 with moderate celebrations. The Johannesburg New Year's Eve countdown party was cancelled by the mayor as the country grapples with the Christmas Eve gas truck disaster, which left 34 people dead. President Cyril Ramaphosa, in his message, appealed to all citizens to work together to pull the nation out of the many challenges it's dealing with. From a Nigerian perspective, the heads of Nigeria's 2 missions in South Africa appealed to Nigerians in the diaspora to always do their best.
As the world ushers in 2023, the hope is for many things gone wrong with the world to get right, or at least get better.
Happy New Year!
Let us enter 2023 with the courage and resilience for which we are known. Let us keep going and keep trying, no matter how difficult it gets. By working together, we can and will rebuild our country. We can and will improve our economy and improve the lives of our people.
Nigeria's High Commissioner to South Africa, Ambassador Mohammed Manta, in his message, appealed for peace among Nigerians in the host country, as well as those back home, ahead of the general elections.
I send warm greetings to fellow Nigerians back home, to continue to pray for the country, to continue to pray for those of us outside, and to look forward with prayers towards the elections in February and use this period to also ensure that all activities during the electioneering are devoid of violence, are devoid of rancor.
Added to the unending delays with permit and visa renewals by South Africa's Home Affairs Department, 2022 was quite a hectic year for some Nigerians in South Africa, with an alarming number of killings of Nigerians by fellow Nigerians. Word on the street is that this is owing to secret cult wars among Nigerians. There's also the vigilante anti-drug attacks and anti-foreigner attacks, which sometimes finds law-abiding Nigerians caught in the middle.
We're doing our best to work with the host government and see and ensure and put an end to these attacks and killings. They are unnecessary, they are unlawful, they should not happen.
I do wish to seize the opportunity to call on these boys on the streets to sit their swords and imbibe dialogue. The various associations, especially under NICASA, has offered them a forum for dialogue.
From fellow Nigerians, the wish is for more responsible citizenship.
Let Nigerians behave themselves. Let be our brothers and sisters keepers at all times. For Nigerians at home, compliments of the seasons. The election is coming on the 23rd of February. My wish is that we select a good leader that's going to change our country for better.
And with those words to live by in 2023, he is hoping for a more peaceful, prosperous year. From Johannesburg, South Africa, Betty Dibia, Channels Television News.
Just about the moment, Luis Inácio Lula da Silva of the Workers' Party, PT, was sworn in as President of Brazil for a 4-year term on Sunday. The inauguration of Lula da Silva and his Vice President, Geraldo Alckmin, took place at 1500 local time during a plenary session of the Chamber of Deputies in Brasilia. After the inauguration ceremony, Mr. Lula said in his speech at the National Congress that the new government will convey confidence to the people, set out to reconstruct the country and restart various social security programs to eliminate inequality and strive to achieve economic growth. This is Lula da Silva's third presidential term, and his return to power comes after he spent more than a year in prison between 2018 and 2019 due to a controversial sentence that was later annulled by the Supreme Court. In October, he was elected president with 60.3 million votes, or 50.9% of the vote, while then-President Jair Bolsonaro obtained 58.2 million votes, or 49.1%. After the elections, the president-elect stressed in recent weeks that he will govern for everyone and that it is necessary to unite the country. Lula da Silva returns to the presidency with an agenda focused on strong social programs aimed at fighting poverty under the motto Union and Reconstruction. The first mourners and family members paying their respects to soccer legend Pele today as the 24-hour wake began. The open casket event is being held at the Villa Belmiro Stadium, the home of Santos Football Club, where Pele began his sporting career as a teenager. As a crowd silently passed, Pele's wife, Marcia Alki, placed a rosary on his body. Pele, who died Thursday, December 29, at the age of 82, after battling cancer, will be buried in a private service after the wake concludes tomorrow, January the 2nd. Among mourners expected at the wake will be newly sworn-in Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, a vice president as well, a longtime Santos supporter, and also FIFA President Gianni Infantino, among others. He will be missed. Well, we have more of that story coming up with Sports at 6. That's it from me on The World Today. Thank you for watching. I'm Millicent Walker.